My name's Chuck Rogers, and my family and I bought Buffa's Bar and Restaurant in December of 2010. And we spent about 8 months thinking about it and researching it before we bought the place. And we had a game plan in mind for what we wanted to do. And what we wanted to do was to, maintain the dive bar atmosphere in the front, but then bring live local music to the back, and to provide a place where musicians could feel comfortable, interact with the audience in ways that you don't really see much in clubs anymore. So we went through the process, and we got a permit. The first step in that process is to just simply apply for it. Since we're in a residential neighborhood, we were denied the first time. Second time we went with, and they said, well, if you can provide letters showing that you've had music for a period of time. And we provided letters going all the way back to Walter Wolfman Washington performing here in the mid-90s from him personally, right? So we provided that proof to the city, and they then granted us a permit. So we've been properly permitted to have live music here since that time in the late summer of 2012. Now, the thing about a mayoralty permit, and this is important to this lawsuit that was filed against us, the thing about a mayoralty permit is that it doesn't matter if we could have a mime here performing once every 6 months, or we could have a symphony orchestra playing here every single night. It's the same permit, same amount of money. And the city has always relied on the decibel level of the act playing to restrict, to provide the restrictions necessary for a residential neighborhood. So, in other words, a mime, always okay. Symphony orchestra, probably not. They're always going to be over what would be acceptable in a residential neighborhood. So, fast forward to April of this year. April of this year, we get an email. Our neighbor, Sidney Torres IV, claims to be having a problem sleeping at night because of music coming from here. And we shared emails back and forth. We shared with him plans to put in new additional soundproofing. We shared with them plans to redo our stage so that it was a floating stage, so vibrations from the musicians and their instruments couldn't get down into the floor or into the walls of the building. And in late May, he basically said, we would encourage you not to spend any money until this challenge plays out, which indicated us he was going to sue us. He didn't file suit until June 23rd. But we tried to work with him. And we shared our plans every step of the way as to how we were going to soundproof the building and assist him. Now, during that process, we took readings everywhere we could around the perimeter of the building. Now, we couldn't get on his property to take readings, but we could take them everywhere else except there. And we've never had a reading go over the city's ordinance limits when measured as the city specifies. His lawyers came to us and said, we'd like to make a deal. And so we spent the best part of an hour going back and forth, our lawyers and his lawyers going into the judge's chambers and then back out to try to strike a deal that would essentially give both parties what they need. In other words, he gets a reduced music schedule so that he can have the quality of life that he wants, but at the same time, we get to take measurements on his property. In order to be able to calibrate this room properly. So even though we will maintain we've never been above the limit, we can't verify that until we can take measurements. So that's sort of where we are right now, is kind of hashing that agreement out. As of right now, it hasn't been signed, even though we've been living by it since the 4th of August. And it's a 60-day agreement, and during that time, we have a reduced music schedule, but during that 60 days, we're going to go through some very extraordinary measures to doing soundproofing. We're completely redoing the walls, the internal walls of our bathrooms and the ceiling and the attic space above the walls, above the bathrooms, to be able to completely soundproof and block the sound from even getting out of the building. So that's where we are now, and that's what we're working on. I don't have the exact number, and because a lot of it, we're going to remodel the bathrooms while we're at it, so there's some of that have to be kind of separated out. I think it's going to be, well, we spent $1,000 on the stage already. We're redoing the stage. We spent another couple $100 on a device that is actually a visual device for the musicians that when it gets above 90 decibels in the room, it lights up. And so we've got that installed. So we're at 1,200. We think that the rest of the soundproofing materials are going to probably, and labor, are probably going to run in the neighborhood of $10,000. So we're probably looking at 12 to 15 for just the soundproofing. It's important to realize we were doing that before. This is what we had planned. This is what we had planned to do before he filed a suit. So we're not doing this in response to the lawsuit. The only thing we're doing in response to the lawsuit is reducing our music schedule in exchange for getting the readings we need to be able to properly calibrate the sound over here. It's a little bit early to tell. We know that Sunday nights have definitely been hurt. Our Sunday night was one of this past one was the first one we've had under the agreement. It was the worst one we've had in months. Starting on September 1st, Labor Day, we were going to have Antoine Deal here every single Monday. He was going to be the Monday act. And so it's hard to gauge. We can go back to busy season where we had different acts every Monday, and we can see once that kicks in, we can see what the effect of that would be. Wednesday nights, our open mic night, we have to end by 9 o'clock, where before we had to end at 11. And it's also too early to tell for that. To see, last week everybody came out to kind of rally for us in that time frame. Tonight, this is a Wednesday, tonight we'll see what happens. But there's no doubt that it's going to have an impact economically on us, and more so on the musicians, because there's a dozen or so musicians that had regular gigs in the next 2 months, in that 60-day period, that hopefully can find other gigs. But since a lot of clubs like us schedule in advance, that might be difficult for them, and that's the hard part of this. Buffa's has been around since 1939, and it's had up until the mid-'80s, it was run under Vince Buffa Sr. When he retired in 1984, since then it's had several owners. And the dive bar in the front has always been able to thrive as a neighborhood bar. And this back area, they tried different things with it. And we spent 8 months trying to figure out what it should be. And we came up with this idea that this would be a nice little music club, a place where you could get dinner. And here's some really high quality local musicians, and maybe a little different than what a lot of the clubs are, where they've turned into more sort of more high. You pay a cover and you go in and it's just the music. Like Tipitini's, you go in, you stand, and you dance and you enjoy the music. There's nothing wrong with that. We wanted something that was a more intimate experience that also involved some flavors of New Orleans in terms of the food, and music. We've been able to bring this back up to this back part up to where it's doing 35 to 40% of our revenue is generated from this space back here, which is also not non-smoking, and it's kid-friendly, or as somebody said, kid-tolerant. In the front, there's smoking and there's video poker, so you can't have anybody less than 21. Back here, no smoking, and I've always told people that, for young kids, not so much, but for kids that are really into music and really want an experience of hearing some local musicians, this is a great place to bring them. He owns a resort in the Bahamas, and in one of the articles, I think it was the Advocate article where he was quoted, he said he lives in New Orleans, he's at that house 1 to 2 weeks a month. So 25 to 50% of the time he's there. But at the same time, it doesn't matter if he's there 365 days a year, or if he's there 100 days a year. If there's a problem and we can address it so his quality of life is better, then we should. And he's also, at one point, he was trying to sell the place. And so it's not just about Sidney, it's also about being a good neighbor to whoever takes over and buys the property. Well, they've never complained. I mean, we've never had a noise complaint here since we purchased the business in 2010. Not once have the police come up come by here because somebody's complained of noise. The neighbors upstairs, over this building that we're in right now, this part of the building, there's nothing. It's just a roof. There's no apartments. The apartments are all over the bar area. And we actually have the apartment on the only apartment on the ground floor. We rent that, and we stay here. Somebody from our family stays here 2 or 3 nights a week usually, just because of our work schedules. So we're also residents in the same building. We don't lose sleep. All right. I mean, we don't hear the band unless it's, you know, maybe early on in the evening, you know, before 10 o'clock we might hear them a little bit, but it's not over the city decimal limits for sure. And we are much worse than the jukebox. And again, it's not something that's keeps us from sleeping. We've done everything we can do to comply with the agreement. We still don't have a signed agreement because his lawyers aren't. They're not cooperating, basically. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. We just don't have a signed agreement yet. We're gonna cooperate. We're gonna do what the agreement says we need to do, whether it's signed or not, until the judge tells us we don't have to. Because again, we've always been neighborly in this. There was no reason for him to sue us. We informed him every step of the way of what we were doing. So, you know, I think that when all is said and done, this is just going to go away. And at least that's of course what we hope that'll happen. We would just like to get back to the business of running a great neighborhood bar.